A prostitute reports to the police that drug dealers have murdered someone in her cellar. But the police can find no evidence of a crime. The only clue is a spit-out piece of chewing gum. Now the scientists hope that the chewing gum will help them solve the mystery. Interstate 70 leads directly from New York City to Easton, Pennsylvania. During the day, Easton shows off its picturesque downtown and colonial architecture. But at night, drug dealers take over the streets as they can earn more here than in New York City. As the drug trade has increased, so has the violence. On August 5, 1996, prostitute Kathy Sarkasti ran to her neighbors and reported that 2 drug dealers had cut her arm with a knife. She was heavily addicted to crack and cocaine. To finance her addiction, she prostituted herself and committed minor crimes. Kathy Sarkasti identified 19-year-old Corey Mayweather and 20-year-old Amy Henry as her attackers. She told police they had used drugs together, and a knife attack occurred after an argument. During questioning, Sarkasti hesitantly revealed another story. A week earlier, the 2 drug dealers and another man named Stanley Hobbs had come to her with a 19-year-old girl. The girl was a drug courier and was suspected of stealing cocaine worth $2,000. 2 of the men took the girl to the cellar. From the kitchen, Sarkasti heard the girl crying. She admitted that she was on drugs and didn't realize everything, but she believed that the girl had been murdered. Later, she saw the 3 men carrying a large box out of the cellar. After that, she never saw the girl again. We asked around the entire neighborhood and finally found someone who could help us. Some secretaries had watched through the window as 3 black men carried a large, obviously heavy box. However, the police remained skeptical. For one thing, they found no blood or other evidence of foul play in Kathy Sarkasti's cellar. For another, there is no record of a 19-year-old matron Smith in any residence registration office. When the police arrested Corey Mayweather for the attack on Kathy Sarkasti, he denied knowing Matrone Smith. Without a body or any other evidence, the police are left with the accusations of a drug addict. 2 weeks after Kathy Sarkasti's testimony, a worker notices a strange odor in a nearby cemetery. The smell comes from an old burial vault, which used to be used to store the dead in winter when the ground was too hard to dig. However, this vault has not been in use for a long time. The worker makes a terrible discovery: the half-decomposed body of a black woman. The coroner, Zachary Lisi, was on site. It was cool and damp in the vault, and a disgusting smell of decay had spread. Thousands of flies were buzzing around, and maggots were crawling over the floor and the body. The newspaper covering the body was several weeks old and did not help the police to determine the exact time of death. The burial vault was locked from the outside, which answered some important questions about the cause of death. The woman could not have locked herself in, as the vault was locked from the outside. It was clear that someone else had put her body in there. There was no evidence of a natural cause of death or suicide. Everything pointed to foul play. She definitely didn't die from an accident or natural causes. It was murder. However, we could no longer determine whether she had been strangled or stabbed, for example, as the maggots had severely eaten away at the neck area and there were no other clues. The police initially suspected that it was the body of 19-year-old drug courier Matrone Smith. Forensic tests disproved this assumption, as the victim was significantly younger than 19. Dental analyses are the most reliable method of determining the age of victims of violence. Dr. Klaus Grundmann, a forensic odontologist and BKA expert witness, has been working for years on the identification of corpses based on their teeth. Children up to the age of 12 often still have milk teeth. Whether it is a young or older adult can often be recognized by the condition of the gums and possible diseases. The brightness of the teeth also provides information about the age of the victim. Dental analysis revealed that the victim had just reached puberty. The identity of the deceased initially remained a mystery. The investigators therefore concentrated on the time of death. The only evidence they had was the insects on the body. Dr. Mark Benneker, one of the few forensic entomologists in the world, is a biologist who reads a crime scene differently to the homicide detectives. He specializes in insects, which often find a body long before the police do. Phormia regina, also known as the black blowfly, is often found in rural areas in summer. Its larvae are often found on corpses. As environmental conditions such as temperature and humidity are crucial factors, inquiries are made about the weather in recent months in order to make accurate calculations. The growth rate of these fly larvae is well documented, so they can be used as a kind of biological clock. The larger the larva, the longer it has been feeding on the corpse, and the longer the corpse must have lain where it was found. The larvae are in the third stage of development, which indicates that the victim was placed in the grave between July 27 and 28. Kathy Sarkasti suspects that the murder in her cellar took place at exactly this time, but if the victim is not Matron Smith, who could it be? When the police discover the half-decomposed body of a girl in a burial vault, there is exactly one clue to her identity. A dental examination reveals that the victim is only 13 years old. The police then carry out a nationwide computer search. While searching for the identity of the body, the police came across the name Richessa Williams. Richessa Williams came from a middle-class Long Island family and had run away from home. Her parents had reported her missing several weeks ago. To confirm her identity, X-rays of her teeth were compared with those of the victim. The examination was difficult, but fortunately, Richessa had small scratches on her upper front teeth, which were also found on the body. It was therefore concluded that it was most likely Richessa Williams. When the police showed Kathy Sarkasti a photograph of Richessa Williams, she confirmed that she had mistaken this girl for 19-year-old Matron Smith. After Richessa ran away from home, she changed her age and identity. Although she had finished elementary school, she only attended school irregularly afterwards. After the death of her father, she began to rebel and became a problem case. Instead of going to school, she got involved in the drug scene and worked as a courier between New York and Pennsylvania. There she met Corey Mayweather, Amy Henry, and Stanley Hobbs. Kathy Sarkasti testified that Mayweather and Henry accused Richessa of stealing cocaine. Stanley Hobbs prevented her from going to the basement, according to Sarkasti's testimony. During the hours that followed, Mayweather took several items from the kitchen before disappearing back into the basement. Kathy Sarkasti saw nothing of the actual murder because she was on drugs at the time. Corey Mayweather is in custody because he injured Kathy Sarkasti with a knife, but he denies being involved in the murder. Kathy Sarkasti heard someone being beaten and this young girl asking to stop whatever they were doing down there, and at some point it was very quiet. Parts of Sarkasti's story are confirmed after her house is searched. Several kitchen utensils are tested for human enzymes. The results are positive, leading to the assumption that they were used as instruments of torture. Hair is also found in the cellar. They come from Richessa Williams. This case was circumstantial from the start. Although Kathy Sarkasti could never tell us that she knew these three men and had seen Richessa Williams at her home in late July, but no one could say what had happened in the basement. The police have suspicions, but they have no evidence against the three accused. Therefore, a few weeks after the body was found, forensic experts returned to the cemetery. Using filters, they sift through the rubble on the floor of the vault and come across something unusual, a piece of spit-out chewing gum. It had been there for 10 to 15 days. When we found it, it was as hard as stone, but still in good condition. The chewing gum was completely dried out and possibly showed teeth marks. If these are confirmed, they could provide clues to the perpetrator. Not only could the victim be identified by forensic dentistry, but perhaps also the murderer. Dental impressions that can be used to identify a perpetrator can be found on chewing gum or apples. These impressions can easily be cast with plaster to create comparative models for potential perpetrators. The investigators have further news. Not only does Corey Mayweather regularly use drugs, but he constantly chews Big Red brand gum. Police officers remember him chewing Big Red gum when they questioned him about Treacherous Williams' murder. The question now is whether this will be sufficient evidence. The chewing gum is subjected to a DNA test to determine whether it contains the saliva of one of the suspects. But the investigators soon realize that they have made a mistake, as the scientists have to remove a piece of the gum for the DNA test. But this alters or even destroys the dental prints. Fortunately, the investigators are able to get the gum back before the DNA test begins, and they send it to the criminal dentist Dr. Dennis Easton instead. Dr. Easton was faced with the challenge of examining the chewing gum without altering it. His problem was how to make a copy of the gum without destroying the evidence. First, he froze the chewing gum. Then he made a special alginate mass, which he poured into a mold and gently pressed the frozen gum into it. When he took the chewing gum out again, he left an impression in the mold, a negative copy. He injected polyvinyl, a plastic that hardens quickly but remains flexible, into this impression. The result was a solid, practically indestructible duplicate of the chewing gum found at the crime scene. Now he had to compare this specimen with Corey Mayweather's dental impression. Like a jigsaw puzzle, he tried to match the copy to different parts of the dental impression until he found the right spot. Mayweather had a slightly crossed bite, where one tooth was on the outside and formed a kind of step in the row of teeth. Dr. Easton also found this step in the gum and was able to place it exactly. That was pretty clear. Dr. Easton suspected that the gum had fallen out of Mayweather's mouth as he was carrying Williams' body into the burial vault. Had he spit it out, the bite marks might have been deformed. Prosecutors are convinced that the men took Treacherous Williams to Sarkasty's apartment to question her about the missing cocaine. In the basement, the men torture her with various kitchen instruments. However, as no traces of blood are found in the cellar, the investigators suspect that Treacherous Williams was most likely strangled. Williams' body is undoubtedly in the large box that the men carried out of Sarkasty's basement. As Corey Mayweather was carrying Treacherous Williams' body into the vault, he makes the mistake of accidentally dropping the gum from his mouth. This proves that he was at the place where the body was found. The forensic experts were able to determine the exact time when the three men brought the body to the cemetery from the stage of the insect larvae on the dead body. This date in turn overlaps exactly with the date on which Kathy Sarkasty saw Williams in her apartment. The blowfly larvae, the chewing gum, and Sarkasty's testimony convicted Corey Mayweather of murder. He had thought he was getting off scot-free until the chewing gum evidence emerged. The defense specialist also came to the same conclusion as we did. Corey Mayweather was convicted through his own teeth. It just goes to show how important the crime scene itself is. You simply have to take enough time to examine it thoroughly and really pay attention to every last piece of evidence. It can be something seemingly inconsequential, like a piece of chewing gum or a cigarette, but it can help identify a suspect. This case proves it, and the investigators were very lucky that they decided just in time for a dental analysis before the DNA test. Because the DNA tests that were carried out later to detect the saliva on the chewing gum were inconclusive. If the DNA test had been carried out first, the dental impressions would have been destroyed, and the prosecutors would have lost their only reliable forensic evidence. The stroke of luck was simply that we not only found the chewing gum, but that people even had the idea of linking the chewing gum to the case. We were even luckier because the chewing gum was well preserved and we had a suspect. If the suspect had disappeared before then, we wouldn't have found out. In November 1998, Corey Mayweather pleaded guilty and thus escaped the death penalty. He is sentenced to life imprisonment. He also incriminates his two accomplices, Amy Henry and Stanley Hobbs. However, Amy was not arrested until 4 years later in Trinidad and was also sentenced to life imprisonment. Stanley Hobbs was never caught and is still at large.